Hello, good evening, good day, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Ask Abhijit show. I hope you're doing great, all of you. And today I'm going to take some 15 or so questions from the comments, and the rest I will take from the live chat. That's what we will do today. So it's going to be a hybrid kind of session, and it's mainly history, geopolitics, all right, and current affairs as well. So before we get into the questions, as usual, let us go and take a look at who all is there on the live chat. I can see Sujal, Agnibha, Yuvraj, Will Nair, Shreya Kathiar, Niharika Gupta, Marm Pandya, Netizen, Vikrant Marathe, Vivekananda, Lucario, Tanbay Deshpande, hello, Tommy Verchetti, hello, Argya Chakraborty, Red, Janvi, Ombe Kerikar, hello, Liberal Mongrel, Dios Pitra, Dishu, Arun Prasad, Ramya, Aniket, Tejomeg, Atul, Pritham, Random Skull, Mehul, Rajesh Babu, Will Nair, Vladimir Abhijit Chavda. Hello, Geopolitical Dube, Chirag Jain, Biprojit Datta, Lage Raho Online. Hello, Liberal, okay, Vantom, Bojack Horseman, VRV, Geopolitical Dube, Red, Pamel Nandi, hello, long time, Rahul, Pritam, Kannan, Ruzi, Meta, Zach, Kiran, Lalit Singh Rawat, Vishnu Mohanan, Bhavin Kakani, Ayush Singh, Soumyajit, SpongeBob, Indian Hindu nationalist, McLovin, hello, Biprojit Datta, Samrud, Jeel, Akshat, Harsh, Kushro, Anusirwan, bonjour, Sanat, Anjay Singh, Sunil, and everybody else. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Before we get into the actual questions, let me remind you all that I have this channel called Abhijit Chavda Clips, on which I'm going to be putting out, and I'm already in the process of doing it, putting on all the short clips of all the answers I give in these live streams. Let me and it's on the pinned chat message in the live chat. So go ahead, subscribe if you want to see the individual answers later on. Let me just put that on the screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. This is the channel, Abhijit Chavda Clips, and I've got all these questions. This is from Ask Abhijit 180. All the questions that have been answered, and before that, Ask Abhijit 179 as well. And the process is on. So all of the answers will come on this channel. And I'll put a few of the answers on this channel as well, but most of them will be on the Ask Abhijit Clips channel. Abhijit Chavda Clips channel. So if you are interested in looking at the individual answers, then you can subscribe to the channel. All right. So with that said, let's take the questions. What questions do we have? McLevin says, the election results are being shown on theaters in my city. Indian politics is wild. Yes, the election results are to be announced soon. Today is the 1st of June, and the election results will be out on the 4th of June. And today the exit polls results are out, which obviously is not the final thing. So yeah, Indian politics is indeed wild, and the big days are almost upon us, 4th of June. So yeah, let's see how that goes. One can be hopeful. Next question, if it turns up. Okay, Harshal says, the EU, European Union, recently announced some financial aid for Manipur's recent hailstorm, but our government denied it. Is that how the far east of India was converted, as they would give this aid through the NGOs? Interesting. So what's going on? The EU, so there was a hailstorm and all that bad weather in Manipur. It caused a lot of damage in the Imphal Valley and the surrounding regions. A lot of crops were destroyed, a lot of homes were destroyed, and all that. Very significant hailstorm. And the European Union has very kindly decided to send some money. So let's go and put that on the screen, shall we? European Union. Where can I find this? Okay. Let's put that on the screen. So this is the news item. The European Union has made available over 22.6 million Indian rupees. What is 22.6 million Indian rupees? That's half a million euros. So it's essentially peanuts. Okay, first of all, they are offering pittance, peanuts, 500,000. I'm not talking about billion, 500,000 euros. Okay, and this is in response to the recent hailstorm and heavy rain that hit Manipur in early May. And here's the statement by the EU. Let's put the statement on the screen. 1 second. Let's put that out. Uh, Here is the actual news item from the EU website itself. European Union provides this much money to assist victims of severe weather in India. Uh, okay, this humanitarian aid will provide crucial assistance to those most affected in some of the worst hit areas. The aid will be now. This is important. Pay attention to this. The aid will be delivered by EU humanitarian partner ADRA. It will prioritize whatever. Okay. So what the question is, what is this ADRA thing, right? What is ADRA? And let me explain what ADRA is. So here's a tweet by Surya Kanegaonkar. Conversion racket operated by the European Union. The EU's humanitarian partner, ADRA, is operated by the US-based Seventh-day Adventist Church. Why is the EU using a non-secular conduit for disbursing so-called aid that a $4 trillion economy doesn't need? And that's a very pertinent question. So this ADRA is not even a European organization. Okay, it's operated by US-based Seventh-day Adventist missionaries. So this is clearly a vulture-like behavior. There is a humanitarian disaster in a part of India. People are severely affected by bad weather. So what does the EU do? It enlists the help of an American conversion factory to send money to route money into Manipur. Okay, so when there is a disaster, when there is a misfortune that has befallen people, they're going to try and utilize that to convert people to Christianity. And as we know, in the far east of India, so-called northeast, Manipur is the only holdout now. I mean, Assam has been being converted in a different direction, to a different religion. Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram, all of it is like almost 100% Christian now. The major power in this region is the church. Okay, and the Meiteis of Manipur are under threat now. I mean, even among the Meiteis, the last Hindus left there, over 2-3 lakh have converted to Christianity. So and they are under attack by the foreigners, by the foreign infiltrators into India, the cookies. Right, they have been surrounded, and now the EU is using this opportunity. First of all, they are under siege, the Meitei Hindus, and then there is the severe hailstorm. So they another misfortune has befallen them. So let us utilize this opportunity to convert as many of them as possible. It reminds me of what happened in Nepal after the disastrous earthquake that happened a few years ago. And all these Christian organizations were saying that, okay, many temples have been destroyed in Nepal by the earthquake. Let's ensure that churches are built in their place. So these people are like vultures, absolute vultures. When some misfortune befalls unfortunate people, they utilize that, to convert them. So what they will do is they'll come in and they'll say, okay, here's a bag of rice. You can have it and your kids can have it, but you need to convert first. Or we're gonna give you various inducements and incentives, but you have to convert for that, and so on. So the EU is operating as a conversion factory. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure what the Indian government has said, but I'm pretty sure the Indian government has said, we don't need your goddamn aid. Keep it to yourselves. So, this colonial attitude still persists among the Europeans and the EU, the West, this colonial attitude. It's, yeah. So I'm glad you brought this up, and it's an important thing that we need to take note of. These activities by the EU and by the West. And this is a geopolitical project. Conversion is a geopolitical project. The Chinese have written about this in the past few centuries. The Japanese have written about this. And I think it's a reasonably well-known phenomenon that when somebody in any nation converts to an Abrahamic religion, they typically develop extra territorial loyalties. And the Japanese have written about this. And the Europeans claim that the Japanese persecuted Christian converts. There were reasons for this. And the Chinese have written about this. The term rice Christian hasn't originated from India. I've shown this in a previous episode. The Chinese in the 19th century wrote about rice Christians. The Europeans would create disastrous problems in China. People would be starving, and then they would offer rice in exchange for conversions. And that's how so many Chinese became Christians. So the same tactics are still in play in a variety of different ways. So let's be aware of this. Okay, next question is by Muklovin. And the question is, why is India... Okay, it's three people who are asking the question. Why is Indian gold reserves stored in England? 100 tons of gold is being brought back by India. Isn't that a great thing happening? And what's your take on the RBI bringing back 100 tons of gold from the Bank of England to store it in India? So India is one of the top 10 nations worldwide in terms of gold reserves. And I'm talking about the gold that is owned by the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India. I think India is in the 9th position or something. The US is way ahead at the top, okay, in terms of gold reserves. How many tons of gold the bank has, the central bank has. In the case of the US, it's a private bank called the Federal Reserve. It's not owned by the US government. It's not operated by the citizens of the country. It's a private bank, and its stakeholders, shareholders are unknown. That's the kind of country the US is. It's owned by a private trust, essentially, or a bunch of private people. Anyway, that's a different story. So the US is the largest holder of gold in terms of the amount of gold the central bank owns. The RBI of India is about, I think, probably number 8 or number 9. And the amount of gold we have is less than 1,000 tons, RBI owned gold. Of course, if you factor in the other gold, when it comes to the amount of gold that the citizens possess, and the amount of gold in temples and all, that's going to be a tremendous amount of gold that we have in India. But the RBI is at number 9 in the global rankings. And about 450 or 500 tons of this gold was in England, the Bank of England, in the city of London, right? And this is an old tradition that we have had, that we give our gold for safekeeping to the Bank of England, and many other nations do this. Generally, these post-colonial, hardly decolonized nations, and some other nations as well. And I've spoken about this before, that when it comes to the UK is a third-rate poor country that is attached to the city of London, which is a first-rate global money laundering hub. So we've had this gold sitting there for I don't know how many decades, about 450 or 500 tons of gold. So recently we have brought back 100 tons of gold back into India, and it's going to be stored in various locations, safe locations. So these are our strategic reserves. Why do we need to have these reserves in a foreign country? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It makes no sense logically or strategically to have your strategic reserves in somebody else's possession. Okay, I don't know, do we get some interest for it or whatever? Why do we need that? Gold is the true store of value globally. The US dollar is a bunch of paper that is backed by a bunch of thugs, military might. That's all it is. The US dollar is not a reliable store of value. It's not a reliable store of currency. It's not a reliable currency. The only real value that you can store is in gold. So, for example, we know the situation in the US. People are complaining about the inflation, the rising prices of petroleum, and how much a house costs these days. Okay, so in 1980, a guy with a single salary could buy a house and sustain his whole family. And today, even if you are working 3 jobs or whatever, and even your wife is working, you still can't afford to buy a house. But here's the deal. Okay, let's say you had a kilo of gold in 1960, and let's say it can buy you a certain kind of house of a certain size on a certain amount of area, property. That 1 kilo of gold today will buy you the same house. So the value of gold hasn't changed, but the value of the US dollar has become garbage. You understand? That's why gold is the only real store of value. It's extremely scarce. It's hard to extract. It's very scarce, very limited, very rare, and that's the real store of value. So when it comes to gold, our strategic gold reserves, we need to have them in India. And I'm glad the Indian government has brought back 100 tons of gold. Let's bring the rest of it back. So yeah, I don't know why we have this gold reserve stored in England. I think it's just a colonial tradition that the colonial sahibs, the great white masters, are the true custodians of our things, and they will keep things safely for us. That attitude, that slavish attitude, that mentally colonized attitude, has persisted for so long. It's there among so many Indians even today. But I'm glad the government is taking the right actions. So good job, great job, and yeah, let's bring the rest back whenever feasible. Next question. McLovin says, what are your views on the Slovak PM's assassination attempt? The guy's name was Robert Fico, if I'm not mistaken, and he's the prime minister, president, whatever of Slovakia, whatever they have. Uh, so, a couple of weeks ago or so, there was an assassination attempt on him, and he was shot, and he was in a critical condition. And I hear that a day or so ago, maybe today, maybe yesterday, or a couple of days ago, he was released from hospital, which means that his life has been saved. He is no longer in danger, and he has been released from the hospital, which is a good thing. Now, what are my views on this? So, do we know where Slovakia is, or should we go to the map? I think we should go to the map. We always go to the map. All right. So, where's the map? Here it is. Here is map. So we go to Europe, right? Eastern Europe. So here we have Europe, and you go to the eastern side of Europe, you go north of Hungary, and you have Slovakia. So this is the small nation of Slovakia. It used to be part of a larger nation called Czechoslovakia. Now you have Czechia and Slovakia. Slovakia is the eastern half of the erstwhile Czechoslovakia. Now, this gentleman, the Slovak leader, Robert Fico. So, first of all, we have to understand, okay, we have seen the map, we know where it is, we got it. Okay, let's take the map off the screen. Now, the point is this: Slovakia is a member of the European Union. Slovakia is also a member of NATO. So, Slovakia is not a fully sovereign nation. When it comes to the EU, there is pooled sovereignty, which means some part of your national sovereignty goes out of your nation's hands, and it lies elsewhere. It lies in Brussels, essentially, and Brussels is controlled by Washington. And when it comes to NATO, once again you have pooled sovereignty. So once again you lose another part of your sovereignty, your military sovereignty and strategic sovereignty, foreign policy autonomy, all that stuff. It goes out of the window, and that then lies in the hands of NATO headquarters, which is again run by the Americans. If you go higher and higher up, it's the Americans who actually call the shots. So Slovakia is a nation that's part of both the EU, and NATO. And we know what policies the EU nations have these days. We see the news all the time. What happens in Germany, stabby attacks, what happens in the UK. The UK is not a member of EU, it's a member of NATO. So if you're a member of NATO or EU, you typically have these immigration policies that are extremely welcoming of the worst kind of people. Typically military age men, single men who come without families, who generally come from certain nations, Middle Eastern nations, maybe Pakistan, maybe Afghanistan, ex-fighters and so on, or African nations, once again of certain religious inclinations and all that. We know what the situation is, right? Now, this guy, Robert Fico, is very strongly anti-immigration, and he believes in border security. So he has troops deployed on the borders with Hungary and other nations to ensure that no goddamn immigrants enter the place, enter his country. He is against immigration. He has said this. Okay, I'm not. It's not. They are not my words. He said this, that every single Muslim person is under observation in his country, and he will not allow the formation of Islamic ghettos and all that. Okay, how Islamophobic is that? Terrible, terrible, condemnable, obviously. So when you are the leader of a nation that's a member of the EU and also a member of NATO, and you don't follow these diktats, then obviously you open yourself up to certain actions. Yes. So I'm not surprised about what happened to Robert Fico. When your minion does not tries to betray you, you have to send the message. You have to send the message. You got to send the right message. You got to set an example. This is uh, this is the kind of language you'll see in the movie The Godfather, right? You got to send a message. So that's how this works. Do you remember Shinzo Abe? Good man, the only good man I can think of when it comes to Japan in the past several decades. What happened to Shinzo Abe? He wanted changes in the constitution of Japan. He wanted the Japanese self-defense forces to become genuinely, I mean, a genuine army, a genuine military force, not a glorified thing. It's still okay, whatever. So we know what happened to Shinzo Abe. We know how, and something similar has happened to Robert Fico. I don't know at what stage he'll come back and resume his duties as the prime minister or president, prime minister probably of Slovakia. Right now, the nation will be governed by somebody else, or somebody else will be acting prime minister. Yes. So yeah, it's sent a very strong message to every political person in Slovakia. You behave, or else you know what can happen. And so I'm not. So I don't know. I mean, I wonder who was behind this. I'm sure they've apprehended some random guy who apparently was holding the gun and who pulled the trigger. But that's who was behind that guy. Who was behind that? Similar to what happened with Shinzo Abe. They arrested some guy who was a former marine or something, and they said he had mental problems, mental health issues, and no further investigation. Who was behind that? Who was the puppet master? Nothing. Similarly, with in this case, the Slovakian leader. So it's about, look. So Slovakia is a small nation that is supposed to go along with what they are told to do by the big daddy, and when you don't do that, then you're gonna face consequences. That is the harsh reality of the world. Okay, civilization is a thin veneer, like they say. It's a very thin veneer, a very thin facade. And behind this thin facade of civilization and democracy and human rights, you have the rule of the jungle. That's geopolitics. That's how the real world works. Welcome to the real world. Next question. Okay, let's put it on. Okay, give me a second. There seems to be. Here it is. Here we go. Okay, Music 31339 says, will the start of a war in the Middle East change the world order like it did in World War II in Europe, which means a complete transfer of powers and new empires rising up? Okay, let's go to a map of the Middle East to see the situation. Okay, now we're looking at Europe. Let's go towards West Asia. So this is the Middle East. We're talking about the Arabian Peninsula, which is Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and the UAE. And you also have Mesopotamia, which is Iraq and Kuwait. And then you have Syria and the Eastern Mediterranean, which includes Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, and then you also have Egypt, which you could say is kind of part of the Middle East. And you could even bring Turkey in, and some people would even include Iran in this matter, in this geographical region. Some people would say Iran is part of kind of an extension of the Indian subcontinent. Whatever you want to say, doesn't matter. It's up to you. You decide how you would like to look at the world. Now, the point is this: the Middle East has always been in crisis, always some problem or the other. You had the Iran-Iraq war, which was a proxy war between the US and Iran, which happened in the 1980s. And it was a disaster for both nations. Then Iran has been under sanctions, tremendous sanctions for decades, and it has caused untold misery, humanitarian disasters, and crises in the nation. And right now we have the situation in vis-a-vis Israel and Hamas that's going on. And yes, right now there's action in Rafah, right? All eyes on Rafah, apparently, when it comes to the useless Indian influencers, so-called Indian influencers. So there is this situation, this war, let's say, going on, low intensity, low level war between Israel and Hamas. And Hamas is based out of the Gaza Strip. So that's what's going on now. Obviously, as we know, I've covered this in the past, that you had these problems between Iran and Israel. So in Iran, a few the Iranian consulate in Damascus was bombed by the Israelis, and the Iranians they hit Israel with a large number of drones and missiles. Then the Israelis hit back, and there's been these tensions. And there's a proxy war situation going on. Obviously, the Iranians are a geopolitically active and ambitious nation. They have proxies in Iraq, they have proxies in Syria, they have proxies in Hamas, they have proxies in Oman. I'm sorry, not in Oman, in Yemen, the Houthis, and much more. And Iran could be by now a nuclear capable nation. They may have sufficient fissile material to build a few nuclear warheads. And as we know, Israel is an undeclared nuclear power. They have, I mean, apparently the number that's bandied around is 90 nuclear warheads. What type of warhead, we're not sure. Maybe tactical warheads, which is a lower yield thing. Maybe 50 to 100 kilotons is kind of tactical warhead. Maybe bigger. We don't know. We don't know. It's all speculation. So that's the situation. Now, here is the deal. None of these nations in the Middle East is either a great power or a superpower. There's only one superpower right now, the US. And in the Middle East, you don't have a single great power. You don't have a single, even a middle power. Iran could perhaps be a middle power. You could perhaps call Israel a middle power, but that's about it. And the balance of power is such that none of these nations are especially too much of a large edge over each other. So you have tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia wants peace in the region. UAE wants peace. They don't want tensions, but this is going on. But none of these nations is capable of destroying the world. There are, let's say, two nuclear powers here. Okay, Israel and maybe Iran is also a nuclear power, but they don't have the capability to destroy the whole world. And none of the really great powers are involved here, actually. So in Syria, you have Syria, you can say, is an ally of Russia. The Syrian government exists and is still in power only thanks to the intervention of Vladimir Putin, because the Americans were trying to effect a regime change in Syria, and they had almost succeeded with the help of Al Qaeda and ISIS and whatnot. The Americans, believe me, yes. So you have that. Then Iran is, you can say, allied with Russia as well as China. And Saudi Arabia and Iran are members of BRICS. So there's a complicated situation here. But none of the great powers are involved directly in this region. The Americans have some troops in Iraq. They have some troops in the eastern part of Syria, allegedly. And they have military bases in Saudi Arabia and various other parts of the region, but not any direct real involvement militarily. So when it comes to changing the world order and complete transfers of powers and new empires rising up, that is something which happens when the greatest powers in the world collide. So essentially, we're talking about a war between the US and Russia. That's what we're talking about. That's when something like that sort of situation could arise. I'm not even considering China to be that powerful of a nation militarily. The two real great powers, one is a superpower, one is a near superpower, are the US and Russia. Russia is way more powerful than China militarily. They can squash China tomorrow if they want to, but they won't do that for a variety of reasons. So, after you understand all this, you'll realize that a war in the Middle East will not change the world drastically. Of course, it will be a disaster for the global economy, because much of the energy that the world needs, the petroleum energy, it comes from the Middle East. So if there's a war there and there's a blockade and all that, then that will be bad for the global economy, including the Indian economy and whatever else. So it can certainly make a lot of difference in the world, very negative difference, but it won't change the global order of power. That won't happen. The war that is capable of doing that is the Ukraine war, and even the Taiwan situation could be a game changer. So these are the two dangerous flashpoints. India China is not that much of a dangerous flashpoint in terms of the world order. Of course, two gigantic powers fighting is not a good thing, but it won't change the world order as such, unless China is wiped out by India, which is right now unlikely. All right, next question. Okay, a bunch of questions together. Ivan Singh says, we are hearing that NATO troops are already on Ukrainian territory. Your thoughts? Pranav says, what are your thoughts on Emmanuel Macron's position on sending NATO troops to Ukraine if required? Isn't it an unnecessary provocation? And what will be the implications? And Ivan says, we hear that Ukraine will receive F 16s in some time. How will it change the war? What will happen if Ukraine does missile strikes on Russian territory? First of all, the Ukrainians have been doing missile strikes, drone strikes, etc., on Russian territory. I remember a few months ago they had attacked a Russian airfield with drones and destroyed at least one large transport aircraft. And they have been targeting Russian facilities, etc., with missiles, with drones. The Ukrainians have been doing it for quite some time. But the real question is about NATO. So NATO troops have been on Ukrainian territory for quite a while, perhaps since the beginning of the war. But they have been there in a specific set of of in a specific role. Okay, so the role they have been playing, as far as we know, is that of military intelligence. So they're providing intelligence, they're providing training, and that sort of thing. So they're not involved in combat operations. Okay, unless you have mercenaries. So we know that American mercenaries, French mercenaries, British mercenaries have been have have gone to Ukraine. Many of them have also been killed, but they are not those mercenaries were not fighting for NATO. They were US citizens and UK citizens and whatever else citizens, but the flag they were carrying what was not the NATO flag. I think they were fighting as mercenaries for Ukraine. And I remember in 22 many of those guys were found dead and all that. They were taken out in missile strikes and whatnot. So that is a separate matter. But NATO troops have been on Ukrainian territory for quite some time in these roles. Now, a couple of days ago, one hears that Joe Biden has said that has given the green light to Ukraine for using NATO weapons against Russia. So right now, until now it was just arms. It was just ammunition mostly, and lots of aid, billions of dollars and all that. But now NATO weapons. I wonder which specific NATO weapons will be used now. But yeah, NATO weaponry will be used against Russia now. They have given the green light. Even the Germans have apparently given the green light. Germany is no caller of shots in NATO. Germany is a vassal of the US and the US military occupation. So it's the US that has given Ukraine the green light for doing this. So you are seeing that we are step by step inching towards further and further escalation. It's called creeping normalcy. They take an inch at a time, and you keep prodding forward. So from the side of NATO, from the perspective of NATO, they are inching forward and they are going up, they are ratcheting up the escalation ladder. And this is very dangerous territory we are in. And once again, you have spoken about the F-16. So in a few months, maybe you will get F-16s in Ukraine. So the Ukrainians could be using soon F-16s to target Russian installations and perhaps launch attacks on Russian territory. Well, once again, that is escalation. And the Russians have been cautioning NATO about this. They are talking about what are they talking about? They're talking about World War III, which means when you talk about World War III, it generally means nuclear war. And nuclear war is something you don't need. And now, if you look at the Russian nuclear stockpile vis-a-vis the American nuclear stockpile, the Russian stockpile is larger, and they have a significant amount of tactical warheads. So tactical warheads are lower yield warheads compared to strategic warheads. And tactical warheads are what you would call battlefield nuclear warheads, battlefield nukes. So a reasonably small yield, it will be a localized explosion. It can take out large concentrations of troops and tanks and military installations. So when you use battlefield nukes, Okay, we hope it never happens, but if you use them, you don't need to be extremely precise and hit the target right on the dot. You can just explode the nuke in the general vicinity of the target, and it's going to ensure everything is out. So that's battlefield nukes. And the Russians have said that they will use nuclear weapons. It's their doctrine, nuclear doctrine, that if Russian territory is under threat, then nuclear weapons can be used. So we are in dangerous territory now. The Americans are slowly, inch by inch, ratcheting up, going up the escalation ladder, the nuclear escalation ladder. That's very dangerous. And when it comes to F-16, so if the Ukrainians start using F-16s, it'll be a boost to their firepower. But it's not like the Russians will just sit idle. They have got a tremendously powerful air force which they have not used at all. And what the Russians are doing is very smart. They are keeping their real firepower, their real assets in reserve for the eventuality that they may actually have to fight NATO in the future. Right now, it's just Ukraine. You can just attrite Ukraine, fight a war of attrition, long war of attrition, which is working just fine. And it's devastated the Ukrainian armed forces. But the real danger is not Ukraine from Russia's perspective. It is NATO, the combined might of NATO. And that is the real danger. And that's why Russia has not used any of its real major assets like the Air Force and all that. They have not pressed their hundreds of fighter planes into service. None of that has happened. They are keeping everything in reserve for that eventuality. And of course, then they have the last option, which is the nuclear option, which nobody, well, I keep saying that nobody wants. We don't want that. So if Ukraine uses F-16s, then they're gonna, well, it's gonna cause a action reaction, right? Yeah, so dangerous times. And NATO, I guess, is just trying to see how far they can keep pushing the Russians, keep pushing them, push them into a corner, and then who knows what will happen. So not good. This is not good at all. Okay, next question is by Akash Buller. Why and how did India recover from colonialism much better than African colonies like Somalia, Chad, and Sudan? Does India's political structure and constitution, particularly its democracy, have any influence on this divergent trajectory, suggesting that democracy has proven beneficial for India? Okay. So, when it comes to African nations, Africa, as we know, was fully colonized by the European powers. Africa was divided up by the Europeans in the late 19th century. And then the Germans, the Belgians, the British, the Italians, and whoever else is left, they all colonized the Dutch, and so on. They colonized various parts of Africa. They divided the whole place up, and they took various parts of it and extracted everything of value out of it. Total, complete destruction of whatever was there and complete extraction. And even today, in the 21st century, Africa is colonized in a variety of ways. So what the Europeans did was they destroyed the traditional governance structures in these kingdoms and empires that they conquered, because they had superior technology, so it was easy for them to conquer these kingdoms and empires. When you have guns and the other side of spears, it's very hard for the spear guys to win against you. I mean, the Zulus can try Shaka Zulu, but yeah, it doesn't work in the long run. So that's what they did, and they destroyed the ruling dynasties, lineages, all that. They destroyed the governance structure. They brought in their foreign religion and converted. And most of Africa is converted to one of two Abrahamic religions. Nothing, almost nothing indigenous is left. And they ensured that whatever continuity you had of governance was destroyed. So the entire governance structures and mechanisms were wiped out of existence. So the only thing that was left was the colonial governance structures and mechanisms. And when they, let's say, allegedly decolonized Africa in the 1960s, etc., there's this movie I can recommend, Adio Africa. No, Africa Adio. It's not an easy watch. Yeah, but it kind of depicts the time period of turmoil when the Europeans were allegedly exiting Africa and giving independence to various African nations. But the kind of independence they gave was no different from colonization. So they would install a puppet government and they would rule by proxy. and they prefer dictators. So you pay the dictator some money and you give them certain privileges. They can come and have a bank account in London or wherever, and you can treat them like royalty, and in return they will allow you to keep on pilfering the resources of their country. So that's how neo-colonization works, and it's still going on that way in Africa. Africa is still colonized through proxy. So that is what happened in Africa. Now the question is, has India recovered from colonization, from colonialism? Lots of people, very smart, very intelligent people, they like to point out that I speak in English. So the reason I speak in English is, okay, I'll not go into the reasons, because it's beside the point. The point is, we all speak to each other in English. That tells us how deeply colonized we still are. If you don't speak good English today, you will not get a good job in India. If you don't speak English today, you will not know what the court judgments are if you are unfortunate enough to be in a court case. And there's so much more. The entire governance machinery of India is the colonial governance machinery. I mean, the question I would like to ask is, what do collectors collect today? You have a district collector in every district, right? What do they collect? Every single institution is a colonial institution. The education system is further alienating Indians from their own culture. India is the only country probably that doesn't teach its children their own culture in the education system. So I don't agree that India is a post-colonial nation or a decolonized nation or a nation that has recovered from colonialism. I think we are taking the first steps now towards recovering from colonialism. Of course, we have not been devastated the way these countries, Somalia, Chad, etc., have been devastated. They have been devastated far worse than us. Of course, if you go back to 1947, the average life expectancy of an Indian person was 31 years. That is kind of Somalia, Chad level. Okay, so that's where we were, but we recovered from that reasonably fast because of the resilience of the Indian people, the large population, and the tremendous resources the nation has, despite the socialism that was imposed on India for decades, which kept India laboring under what some people like to call the Hindu rate of growth, which was actually the Nehruvian rate of growth. And once you freed India from that, India just took off, right? India is taking off right now. India is growing at what, 8.2% per year right now. Last quarter, I believe, for last quarter of the year 2023. So the moment you unshackle the country, it takes off. So I think India is beginning to recover from colonialism only now. And even now, there are these masses of mentally colonized Indians who have this deep inferiority complex and self-loathing. So India's trajectory has been different from that of the African nations. But I don't think it has anything to do with the Indian democracy and India's constitution. India's constitution is a colonial constitution, by the way. What is Indian about the Indian constitution? There is nothing Indian, there is nothing Bharatiya about the Indian constitution. Not a single word is Bharatiya. Where are the Indian values? Where's all that? Nothing. It's all copy pasted from European constitutions, Western constitutions. So there is nothing about the Indian constitution or the Indian democracy that has contributed to India taking a different path from the African nations. India's political structure is the Westminster system, which is ghastly. It's not right for India. That political system, okay, the Westminster system, it evolved over 1,000 years on a small island in the Atlantic Ocean. And that is completely unsuitable for a subcontinent-sized civilization such as India. India has to go back eventually to its own traditional governance system. Okay? And we obviously are the first nation to have been a democracy, the first civilization to have been a democracy, long before Greece was even born. Okay? But ours was a different system. Ours was a hybrid system. So I would not agree that this particular form of democracy has proven beneficial for India, or India's constitution, which has never been ratified by the people of India, has done anything good for India. And the Indian political structure, all that, it has nothing to do with all these things. India has taken a different trajectory because of the resilience of its people and and the great energy the nation has, despite everything that has been imposed upon it, the decades of Nehruvian socialism. Despite that, India has taken a different trajectory. So it has nothing to do with the constitution or the form of democracy that has been imposed on India or any such thing. It's because of the resilience of India itself that we have taken a different path, and hopefully we take a very different path going forward. Right, next question. Okay, this is by Akash Buller again. Why is nationalism shown as an evil ideology in the West? Is it a psychological after effect of the Second World War, or are there deeper factors beneath the surface? So, it's a good question. Yes. So, look at the map. Okay, let's look at the map. What do we see? We see political lines on the map, right? In Africa, you have straight lines everywhere drawn by outsiders. In India, we have these lines. In Asia, we have various boundaries. So every today we're living in the Westphalian system, the nation state system. So it's a system in which every nation is supposed to be sovereign. Of course, it doesn't really work like that, but we have nations, and nations exist, and every nation has the right to exist independently from others, and it has the right to its own self-determination, sovereignty, and of having no interference in its internal affairs. And obviously, every population, when it comes to these nations, every national population has the right to be proud of their nation, which is called nationalism. All right. So nations are a fact of life. Nations are a fact. Nations exist. So why is it wrong to love your nation and to be proud of your nation? Why is it a problem? Why is it a big taboo in the West? And to understand that, we have to understand the true nature of the West. Let me give you an analogy. Go back 2000 years. What did the West look like 2000 years ago? In the year 24 AD, what was the West like? It was mainly ruled by the Roman Empire, right? 2000 years ago, the West was ruled by the Roman Empire. So, once again, map. So, all the way from Hispania, which is Spain, today's Spain, to the British Isles, to the Gallic Celtic regions, which is France, Austria, Czechia, Italy, etc. Not Italy, all that. France, Switzerland, Czechia, and so on. To Germania, which is today's Germany, to Eastern Europe, Thrace, all that. And all the way to Anatolia, which is right now Turkey, and Judea, and all that. All of this was under Rome, even North Africa. Okay, so all of these regions were ruled by Rome. You can say that these nations, these various nations that existed at the time, like Judea, Germania, and so on and so forth, Thrace, and so on, were ruled by Rome, including Egypt. Now, do you imagine that in the year 24 AD, the Romans would have tolerated any nation having nationalistic sentiments? Do you think Rome would have tolerated or encouraged nationalistic sentiments in any of these nations that it ruled? No, that would be a threat to its hegemony. So they would crush any nationalistic sentiment with an iron fist, as we know very well, in case you've read Roman history. They did that over and over and over again. Right? Remember what happened in Judea? What they did to the Temple of Solomon? Only one wall stands today. Who broke the Temple of Solomon? The Romans. Why did they do that? Yes. So the Romans did not tolerate any display or any nationalistic sentiment in any of their subject nations. Now, today you have the Westphalian system, sovereignty. Every nation is sovereign. Or is it? In the EU, you have pooled sovereignty. So every nation isn't really sovereign. It is Brussels that decides the immigration policies, economic policies, and all that affect the ordinary man, woman, child on the streets in various nations in the EU. So where's the sovereignty? It's pooled sovereignty. When you're a member of NATO, it's pooled sovereignty. Pooled, pooled. All these nations come together and become part of NATO, and they pool some of their sovereignty together, which means they give up some of their sovereignty. And who gets the sovereignty? NATO. But who owns the NATO? United States of America. Who owns the EU? United States of America. Whether you realize it or not, whether you want to admit it or not, the United States of America owns the EU and it owns NATO. Okay? So the US, it is a superpower, but it's actually an empire that rules the world in such a way that you don't realize it rules the world. You know what they say in business? If you are a monopoly, it makes a lot of sense to make people believe that you're not a monopoly. Okay? So when you had Microsoft, that was a monopoly in the 1990s and 2000s and so on, it made every effort possible to convince the people in the world, in the government, and the courts that it was not a monopoly. No, 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 we are not a monopolistic corporation. No. Google also tries. Now, why has Google renamed itself to Alphabet? An Alphabet is a holding company with all these different things under it, but the real deal is the search engine and everything that comes with that, AdWords, AdSense, and whatnot. So Google also is trying its best to convince the world that it's not a monopoly. It will try its best. It will try and obfuscate the truth. Microsoft did that as well. Similarly, the United States has done a tremendously good job in making people believe that they believe in human rights and democracy and freedom and all that, when they're actually an empire. So when you're an empire and you rule half the world or more, you will not tolerate any nationalism. Okay? And this has been the situation since 1944, 1945. All right? And that is why nationalism is considered to be an evil ideology in the West. You can say it's an after effect of the Second World War, but the real effect is that the US became the global empire. It took on the mantle from the UK, the British Empire. The entity continued, but the center of power was transferred from London, UK, to Washington, DC in the US, and that's what happened. And since then, they had this Atlantic Charter in which they said, "Oh, these wonderful things. We believe in democracy. We believe in non-interference. We believe in not changing borders. We believe in uh, human rights and all." But if you look at their actual actions, it's the opposite of that. So that's the reason why nationalism is regarded as an evil ideology in the West, especially in Western Europe and all that. In Eastern Europe and Russia, nationalism is great. In India, India is conflicted because of the mental colonization of most Indians. But yes, there's been seeds of nationalism even in nations like Japan, which have been stamped out. But yeah, so there you have it. That's the answer. Guardian 08 says, I've been watching a TV show called Shogun, and it's very interesting to watch ancient Japanese culture. What happened to their culture, Japanese culture? It is still there, but now Japan seems more viewed for their cartoons and anime, which is almost everywhere in Japan. My question is, what happened to the Japanese? They used to be so ruthless, especially in the Second World War. Now they seem very timid and weak, with this anime and cartoons being what they are known for now. We have to live in reality, and war is a real thing. I personally don't think that if Japan was ever in a war, they would win without US help. What happened to Japan is the question. Japan used to be this powerful nation, this great empire, the land of the rising sun. It was known for its the samurai period, the samurais, and then you had the Meiji era, the Meiji period, the Meiji restoration, and there was the end of the samurai era and the beginning of the Japanese empire, the Japanese colonial empire, in which they tried to pretend like they were white people, and they behaved in the same way as the Westerners, annexing territories and colonizing countries and all that. That's what happened. So here's what happened to Japan. Japan used to be a very traditional nation. They were a closed off nation, and they knew how the West behaves. It's a rapacious, colonizing force. They will try and convert your people to their foreign religion and use that religion to fan extraterritorial loyalties among your population. They will try and exploit your nation's resources and destroy your economy. The Japanese knew the West would do that. That's why they were a closed off nation. And you had the samurai period, several centuries of that. They had shoguns, various shogunates, and all that. And the samurai were staunch Buddhists. See, the original Japanese religion culture, it's a polytheistic religion called Shinto. So that is the original thing, and it is way closer to Hinduism than Buddhism, actually. Buddhism is like a woke form of Hinduism. I think Alan Watts said that Buddhism is Hinduism stripped for export. Anyhow, so Shinto is there, and then you have Indian influence coming into Japan in the third, fourth century AD, and Buddhism comes in, and then Shinto and Buddhism syncretize together, and Japan evolves a syncretic culture over 1,500 years. And then you have the samurai who are staunch Buddhists, and they have this code of honor, this code of life called Bushido. It is very much like the Rajput code of honor, essentially the samurai code of honor, very much similar to that. Very disciplined life and all that. And then you have in the 19th century the destruction of the samurai system by a bunch of plotters who were actually in control of the Meiji emperor's government. The Meiji emperor had become just a puppet, essentially. And these guys, what they did was they destroyed the system of the samurai. They killed off all the samurai with using foreign weapons. So this is when Japan had opened up, and they had realized that if we don't adapt to the ways of the West, then we will become victims of the West. So Japan destroys the samurai system, eradicates it completely, and suddenly becomes completely, in a decade or two, completely westernized. They start wearing Western dresses and start using Western weapons and Western battle tactics and strategies, and they start conquering other countries and colonizing other countries. And the Europeans and Westerners are very impressed by the Japanese. Look at these people, just as civilized as us. Yes. So by becoming brutal barbarians, and another thing the Meiji Restoration did or attempted to do, they tried to portray Buddhism as a foreign religion, and they tried to eradicate Buddhism from Japan. Did not work, but they succeeded in at least one thing. Today, the Japanese people regard Buddhism as a foreign religion. It's still a Japanese religion, but it's a foreign origin. Before the Meiji Restoration, Buddhism and Shinto were syncretized together. Same temple, both things. Today, it's different. So today, most Japanese, they will do weddings and all through the Shinto thing, and when they do their funeral, it will be a Buddhist funeral. That's the kind of thing you have in Japan today. So that's what happened. So Japan became a nitro version of the West, and they started conquering everybody, conquering all territories. They fought the Russians and defeated the Russians in 1905. They conquered Manchuria and so much more. Okay, so I'll not go into all that. So they became like a mega version of the West on steroids. And then you had the Second World War, in which they allied with Germany, and the Americans tested two nuclear weapons on Japanese territory, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan eventually had to surrender. And the Emperor of Japan had to declare his humanity. So the Emperor of Japan was traditionally seen as a son of God, the son of the gods. But after the surrender to the Americans, he had to declare his humanity and renounce his divine status. And such is the situation today as well. So that's what happened. So Japan was emasculated. They were forced to swallow a new constitution written in 1945 by the Americans. Even today, the same constitution is in force. Not a single word has been changed. And there are more than 130 permanent US military bases on Japanese territory, which means Japan is under permanent US military occupation with a foreign constitution. And their armed forces are called the Japanese Self-Defense Forces. So that nation has been completely emasculated. It has been turned into Disneyland for the Americans. When the Americans want to go on vacation, they go to Japan and treat the nation as Disneyland. So that is the situation in Japan. So the Japanese are just trying to cope the best, survive the best way they can. Their economy has been destroyed since the 1980s. The Plaza Accords was the turning point. Japan's economy has been in recession for quite some time. Japan is in danger of becoming a middle income nation from a high income nation. And the birth rates have fallen horribly. Yeah, terrible situation in Japan, and they have so many enemies now because of the American presence. China, Russia. The Kuril Islands dispute is a different story. I've spoken about that a couple of times at least. The Kuril Islands dispute. So that is what's happened to Japan. So they are doing the best they can, and they're putting out anime and J-pop and whatever else, and that's what they are known for today. That's what's been done to them. They have been destroyed, and their economy was growing very rapidly in the 20th century, and it became the second largest economy in the world. And they could even have surpassed the U.S., but the Americans ruined them with the Plaza Accords. And then there was a slow decline. That's what happened. But there has been this nationalistic sentiment in Japan. There have been seeds of nationalism. So there is this author called Yukio Mishima. Okay, this guy called Yukio Mishima. He was a nationalist, a Japanese nationalist. He was a poet. He was a writer, one of the most important writers in Japanese language in the 20th century. He was a poet. He was a writer. He was a sports person. He was a model, and he was a Japanese nationalist. Let's put this guy on the screen. Yukio Mishima. So where is he? Where is he? Okay, here we have it. Yukio Mishima. Excellent. I mean, very interesting writer. This guy. So he was a Japanese nationalist, as you can see, very martial guy, uh, an author, a poet. He was yeah, he had these interesting photographs and poses, and he tried to well, he tried to bring back the spirit of nationalism in Japan. He tried to make the Japanese people understand that they were under occupation. They were being slowly destroyed. Their country was slowly being destroyed. Um, and in 1970, I believe he tried to uh, conduct a coup in Japan. So he had formed an organization, a small organization, and they had been given access to the Japanese self-defense forces. For some reason, they were allowed to train with them. And in 1970, this guy with three or four of his associates went to one of the headquarters of the Japanese self-defense forces, and he took control of this thing. And he took the commander of the headquarters hostage, and then he goes on the balcony and gives this speech. Once again, let's put that on the screen. There must be an image of the speech. There it is. There is Yukio Mishima giving a speech to the soldiers of the Japanese self-defense forces, in which he's trying to exhort them to make Japan free again, free themselves from American occupation, have some self-respect, blah blah blah, all that. And it was not successful. The speech was not successful. The soldiers did not agree with him. And at the end of the speech, he went back inside. He apologized to the station commander, and then he committed seppuku, which is also called harakiri, which is a ritual suicide. So there has been nationalistic sentiments in Japan, and I'm sure there still is some of that. But yeah, the Japan is totally controlled by the US. And if you become a little dangerous and a little powerful, you know what happens. Shinzo Abe is a great example. So there you have it. Cinephile says, you always say to refer to history from multiple books and from multiple sources, but who actually knows the truth of what happened in the past? The written things could be fabricated, and the stories that have been passed on could be dubious. If I'm the ruler, I would not let anyone write bad things in the texts. Maybe the rulers were doing bad deeds, but they were showing their people that they were good, like double faced people. I think most of the history we know is a lie. Look, history. I say read history from multiple books and multiple sources. So the source of history is not just historiography and writing. There's archaeological evidence. There is much more to that. So when it comes to Roman times, the battles they had with the Celtic peoples and whatnot, it's not just the Roman records, it's also archaeological evidence, and which kind of helps us reconstruct what happened. So it is not only about the books that were written from that period. Let me give you a pertinent example. You may have heard of these people called the Vikings. There was a Viking age from about the 700, 600s, 700s AD to about 1000 something AD. The Viking Age. So these were the people who lived in Scandinavia, the Scandinavian people, present day Sweden, Norway, Denmark, that region. And you had some great rulers. You had Rollo the Viking, Rollo, who is the ancestor of every single king and queen of England from the year 1066 onwards. You had Rollo, you had semi mythical figures like Ragnar Lothbrok, you had Canute the Great, you had Harald Hardrada, who invaded England in the year 1066. That was the end of the Viking Age because Harald Hardrada was slain, and so on. Now, here's the deal. The Vikings, what you are saying is that if I'm the ruler, I would not let anyone write bad things in the texts. Well, if you read what the Christians have written about the Vikings, you will see it's not anything flattering or complimentary. So, despite being these great warriors and conquerors, the Vikings, yeah, only bad things have been written about them. Because the Vikings had the swords and they did defeat the Christians and all, but eventually they themselves became Christianized, and then the monks in the Christian church, they all wrote terrible things about the Vikings. Look at the Mongols, great rulers, great conquerors. They have been demonized to hell by Western and Islamic writers. Right? Even today, there are all these myths that are being spread about the Mongols and their great ruler, Sri Genghis Khan. So it's not entirely the way it looks. Okay, history is not always written by the winners, by the way. When it comes to the Vikings and the Mongols, they were the winners. But who wrote the history? The losers wrote the history. So it's not like that. But I agree with you. Much of history is a lie. That's what Napoleon said. Napoleon Bonaparte. History is a set of lies agreed upon. So you have to discover the truth of history. And there are people who are in love with certain authors and certain in the standard narrative. And you go against that, they said, no, you are whatever. They'll call you names. So that's how it is. So history, a lot of history is lies. I mean, look at Indian history. India's historians refuse to acknowledge the fact that India has suffered the greatest genocide in human history. From the year, let's say, 1000 AD to the year 1707 or so AD. And then a second genocide at the hands of the British. But you will not see that in any textbook. So you are right. Much of history is a lie. And we have to uncover the truth of history. But it's not always the winners who write history. Sometimes it's the losers who write history. And we have two examples here. The Vikings and the Mongols. Two questions. Kepler's laws were not derived based on Indian astronomical data, right? Tycho Brahe's observations were what helped Kepler, right? And the second question is, after the Europeans started coming to India, we saw a sudden surge in the number of scientific discoveries taking place in the Western world. A lot of people have said that these people have actually stolen our knowledge and labeled this knowledge as their own knowledge. Does this hold any merits, or are there the other reasons for the same? Okay, so these two questions are actually related to each other. Let's talk about Kepler's laws, 3 laws of planetary motion. I'll not tell you what the laws are. That's a different topic. That belongs in a physics live stream. But Kepler's laws of planetary motion. And Kepler derived these laws of planetary motion based on the astronomical data that his teacher, his guru, Tycho Brahe, had compiled. So Tycho Brahe had this astronomical data, and Kepler deduced his laws based on that astronomical data. So the question is, it was not based on the Indian astronomical data, right? Then Tycho Brahe's observations were the one that helped. But the question is, where did Tycho Brahe's observations come from? And so the thing is this, my dear friends, it is very easy to tell lies, but to debunk lies, it takes 100 times the effort. Because you have to show 78 pieces of evidence and put it all together. It is so easy to put out misinformation. It is so easy to lie. And the Europeans have been lying about this for centuries. And the true sources of the knowledge are lost. So let me show you some evidence based not on my research, but based on the research done by others. Okay, this is not my research. So let me put some stuff on the screen. Okay, let's take a look at this. Remove this. So what does it say? This is a research paper from JSTOR. It says it's by A.S. Aidan. It says the earliest extant Arabic arithmetic. The earliest extant Arabic arithmetic. What is it called? Kitab al-Fusul fi al-Hisab al-Hindi. Kitab al-Fusul fi al-Hisab al-Hindi. Okay? And they call it a blatant, just imagine the blatancy of this lie. The book's name is Kitab al-Fusul al-Hisab al-Hindi, but they are saying it's the earliest extant Arabic arithmetic. How barefaced of a lie can you have? This is that. Okay? So let me give you a different thing here. This is a book that's available online. The Arithmetic of Al-Uqlidisi. The story of Hindu Arabic arithmetic as told in the Kitab al-Fusul fi al-Hisab al-Hindi. So over here, they're calling it Hindu Arabic arithmetic. So at least they're not lying completely. And the arithmetic was of whom? It was of Al-Uqlidisi. And this is the real Euclid. There was no Euclid. Euclid is a myth. The real Euclid was this guy, Al-Uqlidisi, who was a translator who translated Indian arithmetic and mathematical texts into Arabic. Now I'm going to show you some tweets by a gentleman called Joseph Nooney. He has done a tremendous amount of research. So all this research is entirely his. None of it is mine. All the credit goes to him. So here's the first tweet. So W.H. Donahue, Cambridge PhD, proved that Kepler did not make the original data needed for his laws. He had poor vision from smallpox. Kepler, Johannes Kepler. His master Tycho's Mars orbit is also suspect. Where did the data come from? Which other astronomer had elliptical Mars data is the question. And who and there's evidence that this is all fabricated. One second. Let's put that on the screen. And this is the research paper that he is talking about. If it does turn up on the screen, here it is. Okay, Kepler's fabricated figures covering up the mess in the new astronomy. This was published in 1988. Okay, he had fabricated these figures. So how did this happen, and where did Tycho Brahe get all this data and all that? So Tycho Brahe was a close associate of Jesuit scholars. Who were the Jesuits? The Jesuits were the scientific thieves associated with the Vatican Church. So they were scholars in their own right, and their job was to go to various nations like India, Mesopotamia, China, wherever, and steal knowledge from there. And they were well versed in science, the Jesuits. So Kepler was a close associate of Jesuit scholars. And the Jesuits even stole philosophical texts and all that. So much Indian philosophy has been digested into the West and presented as Western philosophy. But we're talking about Kepler here. So and Tycho Brahe. So Tycho Brahe was a close associate of Jesuit scholars. He published the same planetary model of Nilakantha, who lived before him. But Tycho used simple circular orbits instead of mathematically complex eccentric orbits of Nilakantha. And Kepler inherited all of Tycho's documents. Do you understand what happened? Okay, that is what happened. Now let's see something else. So all of this research is entirely by Joseph Nooney, not by me. I'm just putting it out here. If you think it's possible for two people to come up with the same complex astronomical models independently, read this passage by Otto Neuberger. Regarded as the foremost historian of science, of course, he didn't apply the standard on Newton, Madhava, or Kepler, Nilakantha. So you can read this. You can pause the screen and read this if you like. But I'm going to move on to the next tweet. Now, here is more evidence. There's plenty of evidence of Jesuit manuscript gathering activities in Kerala, including a direct statement by Matteo Ricci and even a request by Kepler to a Jesuit for more eclipse data from India. 16th, 17th century Europe was doing mass plagiarism of Indian texts. And there is a sample of this over here. Okay, next tweet. So the implications cannot be allowed to go unrecognized. Europe was digesting the manuscripts of the Indian trio, Aryabhat, Brahmagupta, and Bhaskara for close to 500 years before Galileo threw things down the Tower of Pisa and apples fell on Newton. Okay. Next. Just like Tycho Brahe stole the erroneous planetary model of Nilakanta, Galileo chose to use the exact same analogy used by Aryabhatta to describe relativity 1,000 years after Aryabhatta. The boat. The verses 9 and 10 of Aryabhattiya's astronomy section describe it. And Galileo used exactly the same thing. Okay. And here is a research paper by Dr. C.K. Raju, Calculus Transmission, how the Aryabhattiya, the 24 sign values and much more were transmitted. Essentially, they were stolen by Europe. So you can check this out. You can Google this, Calculus Transmission by C.K. Raju, in case you don't know how to use Google. Google it and check it out. So there is plenty of evidence, but it is not easy to find. You have to do some hard work and dig all this up. All these false claims, they're easily accessible on Wikipedia, in various textbooks, in various history books. All these false claims are rife. Okay, that everything was independently discovered by Europeans. But to make the connections between the Jesuits and Tycho Brahe and the Jesuits in Kepler and the Jesuits in Kerala and the Aryabhatti and all, that information is hidden deep beneath the surface. It's very hard to discover this. And that's why all credit to Joseph Nooney and for Dr. C.K. Raju, etc., for doing this tremendous work, and the other authors who have also been doing this. So that is the deal. The Europeans have been mass plagiarizing Indian history, and today everything is attributed to Europe. All this science, all the mathematics, all the philosophy, which they have stolen from India. But yeah, we need to bring this out in the public, and I'm glad many authors are actually taking the time to do the deep research needed to expose these frauds. Okay, Tejas says, how does zebu cattle counter AIT Aryan invasion theory? Is there an migration, tourism, picnic theory? Is there any evidence of the out of India migration of them? The cattle could have existed in multiple areas at the same time. Okay, what is Tejas referring to? Let's put that on the screen. I'll put one example of this on the screen. We're talking about the cattle. So this is a report from 2019 in phys.org. It's a physics website, but I found it here because I read physics things. So it says ancient genomics pinpoint origin and rapid turnover of cattle in the Fertile Crescent, which means the West Asia region, Middle East region. Okay. So, and this is an example of a zebu-shaped weight from Tel Beth Shemesh. The keeping of livestock began, blah, 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 blah. Ancient DNA has revealed how the prehistory of the world's largest domestic animal, the cow, chimes with these events. Sequencing ancient bovine genomes and so on. So a dramatic change happened about 4,000 years ago when we detect a widespread wholesale influx of zebu genetics from the east. Okay, zebu genetics, which means Bos taurus. Bos indicus of zebu cattle. Zebu cattle are Bos indicus, and they originate in India, in the Indian subcontinent, and from the perspective of these Westerners, the Indus Valley region. So suddenly, around 4,000 years ago, there was a massive, widespread influx of zebu cattle into the Middle East from India. Okay, and this was the beginning. And you find this in the Middle East, in West Asia. You also find this in Mesopotamia, which is West Asia, and you also find this in Egypt, and so on. And today you will find that most cattle in this region and most cattle across Africa have Indian cattle genetics. That's what you find. And just for your reference, if you are wondering what zebu cattle are, I think we are all familiar with them in India. But let's just show an image of zebu cattle. Zebu. That's it. Zebu cattle. So this is your standard Indian bull, right? The Indus Valley You see these bulls and cows in the Indus Valley stamps, in the Saraswati Sindhu, so-called Harappan, those seals and all that, right? So this is the Indus Valley cow, and that's the zebu cattle that we are referring to. Okay, let's take that off the screen. So it doesn't counter the Aryan invasion, migration, tourism, picnic, spacecraft myth at all. It actually does something else. Understand this: cattle are domestic animals, right? So a bunch of cattle will not wake up tomorrow morning and say, "Hey, let's go to the Middle East," and then they all pack their bags and 10,000 cattle go off on a march for several thousand kilometers from India and reach the Middle East. Cattle don't behave like that. Cattle do things their masters tell them, and they go wherever their masters go. So if a bunch of cattle, a large scale, massive influx of zebu cattle happens in the Middle East and that part of Africa, Egypt, etc., about 4,000 years ago, it means these cattle came with Indians who went there. The cattle don't travel on their own. So what does that tell you? This alleged Aryan invasion, migration, picnic, wherever, whatever happened allegedly around 1500 AD, right? That's what the theory says. So that's 3,500 years before today. But we are talking about the migration of Indians in large numbers westwards 4,000 years ago. So this is the out of India theory we're talking about. We're not trying the presence of the evidence of zebu cattle in this region doesn't counter the AIT. It bolsters the OIT that Indians were traveling westwards for thousands of years before today. There's so much evidence of that, but these people want to minimize that and they want to disregard that. Okay, so this is the evidence of out of India migration. There are so many other pieces of evidence of out of India migration. We have the Bodhayana Shrota Sutra, which is a late Vedic text that talks about the migration westwards of Amavasu. And he goes in the region of Gandhara and Aratha and Parshu. Gandhara, we know it's Afghanistan, present day Afghanistan. Parshu means Persia, but Aratha could be Armenia, Mount Ararat. So there is that, but there is literary evidence. Then we have who are these guys? Hittites, Hurrians. Vashukhanni was the capital of whom? Let me just quickly Google that. Vashukhanni. Vashukhanni was Mitanni. The Mitanni Empire that existed about 1500 BC in Anatolia. In Anatolia and present day Syria. They spoke what language? They spoke Sanskrit. Late Vedic Sanskrit. Okay, and we have the oldest evidence of written Sanskrit in Syria, present day Syria. Yeah, so that's another evidence of out of India migration. And then there's much more. I will not go into the details. So there is so much, tremendous amounts of evidence of out of India migrations way before the so-called alleged Aryan invasion migration thing happened. So the evidence of zebu cattle, it actually bolsters the out of India story. Of course, there are migrations out of India, and you find the first evidence, the earliest evidence that we have of Indian cattle in Egypt, also around 4,000 years before today. So, and the cattle did not exist in multiple areas at the same time. We know when the first influx of cattle happened. It's around 4,000 years before today. That's when the first influx of Indian cattle in this region happened. It is known. Scientific data. There is no evidence of Indian cattle genetics in this region before that, or Indian cattle bones or anything. So that is evidence of an out of India migration. All right. Next question. Saurabh Badoria says, was the telescope invented by Indians? As some ancient texts mention something like a telescope. Okay. I have seen no evidence of any. Okay, if there are texts that mention it, you can refer. I mean, you can specify what text they are. That would help me to investigate this. But as far as I know, I have not seen any evidence of ancient texts mentioning a telescope. Indian texts, I mean. So as far as I know, ancient Indians did not invent the telescope. And that's strange, actually, because ancient Indians invented in so many things. But the telescope apparently wasn't among those things that they invented. So, yeah. Next, Samrudh K say uh, there are security issues in the T20 World Cup and threats given by ISIS apparently. What's your take on this? There is a Champions Trophy in Pakistan next year. What decision do you think the government would take on sending the Indian team to Pakistan? Okay, when it comes to the T20 World Cup, I believe it's starting tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, and it's being held in the Caribbean, which is the West Indies, and in the United States. And apparently, ISIS or whatever, some terrorist organizations have given some threats. So I would say it is the duty and responsibility of the host nations to ensure the complete safety and security of the teams. So I think we have to trust the Americans, the United States, and the Caribbean nations to make sure that there is proper security of the Indian players, and if required, the Indian government and the BCCI can send extra security. So yeah, I'm sure they will do whatever is necessary. But yeah, India is a target. India is a nation that's growing. The economy is growing. India is becoming more relevant geopolitically and in a variety of other ways. And it's something that lots of people don't like, especially in the West. And when it comes to ISIS, I would recommend you read the book Black Flags. That will tell you who actually created ISIS. All right. Now, about the Champions Trophy in Pakistan next year. Obviously, we should not send our players there. How can you send an Indian team to Pakistan? A temporary nation, an artificial and temporary nation, and obviously the epicenter of global terrorism. You can't do that. So, what India should do, what the BCCI should do, is arm twist the ICC into holding the Champions Trophy elsewhere, not in Pakistan. And arm twist the other nations also to say that we will not go to Pakistan. Arm twist. The BCCI has enough money now to arm twist everybody at once. So use the money, use the leverage, arm twist everybody, arm twist the ICC, arm twist Australia, South Africa, England, whoever else, and ensure that if the Champions Trophy is held in Pakistan, nobody goes there. Okay? Afghanistan, you tell them not to go. Afghanistan's home base is anyway India. Anyhow, so that's what needs to happen. Next question is by Gaurav. I've heard someone say that today's Sri Lanka is not the Lanka where Lord Ram went, and yeah, it's somewhere in Malaysia or Indonesia. Is that true? And is there any evidence for this? And where to start learning the truth? Okay, let's talk about this thing. That's two questions in here. Look, I'm not sure who has made these claims, and if it's one person, multiple people. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. But look, okay, maybe maybe Lord Ram went to Botswana, or maybe he went to New Zealand. I mean, there's this place called Lanka, Sri Lanka, but we have to disregard that, right? Maybe he went to Botswana, maybe he went to New Zealand, maybe he went to Czechoslovakia, Lord Ram, and maybe Raman was Slovak. Yeah, I mean, look, as far as I understand things, I'm sure I'm not a very intelligent person, very little knowledge, so maybe I'm wrong. But as far as I know, so as far as I see things, Lanka and Sri Lanka are the same thing. Okay, and so if it was, let's say, Botswana, or if it was Czechoslovakia, or if it was New Zealand, or if it was Malaysia or Indonesia, where's the bridge? The bridge that was built. We have a bridge between India and Sri Lanka, right? Is there? Where's the bridge? So I don't know what sense it makes. So I don't take this theory seriously. I'm sure people have done a lot of research and hard work and all, but come on, that doesn't mean every theory should be taken seriously. So I don't agree with this. Of course, I may be wrong. Obviously, there are people more intelligent than me out there, but that's my perspective. If it is not Sri Lanka, it could be Botswana or Czechoslovakia or New Zealand or maybe Mexico. Arijit Banerjee says, how to get addicted to studies. I've lost all interest in my studies. How do you convince yourself to study when you were in school? I am in the 10th standard. Please give some advice for boards. I've been there. You know, the problem you face as a student is you don't understand what is the point of what you're doing. As a child, as a young person, you want to go and have some fun. You want to go and play, or you want to meet with your friends, and you want some time for yourself and for having some fun. But you're made to study, and you don't see the point of studying. What am I going to get by studying all this, by memorizing all this crap, all this garbage? What's the point? And that's why people get frustrated, people get depressed, people get disillusioned, people lose interest, and then they perform poorly in their exams, and then the consequences become apparent. So you have to see it this way: you will have no motivation or interest in your studies unless you have a long term goal. So you're in the 10th standard, right? Do you have a goal, a vision for yourself of where you want to be when you are 30 years old? What do you want to have achieved by the time you're 30 years old? What you need to do is you need to paint a great grand picture of a future, of a great future. Think of the greatest thing you could do with whatever potential you have, and imagine that you want to do that by the age of 30, and then you want to work backwards from there. Okay, let's say I want to be the next Elon Musk, let's say hypothetically. Okay, let's say you want to be the Indian Elon Musk. You want to have a valuation of your company of $500 billion by the age of 30. Let's say there's no harm in thinking big. So you want to do that by the age of 30. So then you work backwards. Then by the age of 25, what would you need to have achieved if you want to do that by the age of 30? Then by the age of 22, what do you need to achieve? Then by the age of 20, what do you have to achieve? Then does it mean that you need to have a good college education? And does it mean that you need to do to get into a good college, you need to get good marks in the 12th and 10th exams? When you see that way, the cause and effect chain, then suddenly you get the motivation. Oh my God, I want to do that. So let me get these good marks now and let's study. Doesn't matter if it's good, if the syllabus is good or not. I am doing this for a purpose, and then everything becomes worthwhile. So my point is, I'm just giving a very random hypothetical example, maybe a very hyperbolic example. The point is, you need to know where you want to go, and then you need to find the right pathway by working backwards in time. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Think of the greatest people you admire and how they achieved their thing, and how did they reach where they've reached. That will show you the path. And usually, for most people, you don't want to be Elon Musk, right? For most people, let's say you want to have a good job with a package of 50 lakhs a year, let's say. So for that, you will need to have a good degree, college degree, university degree, which means you will need to get into a great college, which means you need a good, good performance in your 12th and 10th standard exam. So when that big thing at the age of 30 motivates you, when you can see it, and then you will see what path you have to go through, then it makes sense. Then you will get the interest back in studies. But if you have no great dreams or something, no great objective, no great ambition, then it is very hard to be motivated. So my point is, be ambitious. Think of what you want to achieve in life. Think big. Be ambitious. Have big dreams, and then work backwards, and then see if your path has to go through getting good marks. And if it is the case, then you will be motivated, right? Okay. What next do we have? Let me see. Okay, Shashwat says, "Do you love watching Martin Scorsese movies?" I like I like movies. I'm a movie buff. You give me the chance, I'll watch two movies a week on the big screen in a movie theater. But today, there's no good movies around. Terrible. So yeah, one of the great directors is Martin Scorsese. I've seen many of his movies. A couple of movies with Robert De Niro. Taxi Driver was one. Raging Bull, the black and white movie where he's a boxer. That's a good one. Goodfellas. Then Casino is a good movie. Gangs of New York, with one of the great actors. What's his name? The guy who his first movie was Gandhi. Richard Attenborough's Gandhi. Okay, the guy who was in Gangs of New York. Then you have The Aviator with what's his name? Leonardo DiCaprio. Then there is The Departed. Then there is a movie called Hugo, a children's movie. So I've seen a bunch of his movies, and I'm a big movie buff overall. And Martin Scorsese is one of the greats for sure. All right, that is it for the questions that I've selected. Now let's take some questions from the live chat. Yeah. Our friend Dixie, Dixie has pointed out the name Daniel Day Lewis. You've been watching Austin Powers, have we? Okay. What other questions do we? Okay, let's do some live chat questions. All right. Okay, Crew Wit says, if white Aryans who migrated to the east founded Indian civilization, why did Aryans who migrated to the west could not create a superior civilization and the Germans remained primitive for many millennia? Oh my God, you have destroyed all their arguments in one shot. Yeah, the white superior Aryans who migrated to the east and to India and Persia, they founded the Indian civilization and Persian civilization, right? But another branch of these Aryans allegedly also went into Europe. So why did those Aryans not create any great civilization? Why were they eating raw meat until 2000 years ago? And why were they living in trees and caves? Do you know how the Germans behaved? The Germanic tribes, the whatever the names were, Cherusci and whatever. Those Germanic tribes. The Romans have described the behavior of the Germanic peoples. They used to be clothed in animal skins, half naked, and they would live like wild beasts, live alone in the forests to prove how strong they were, and then they would have this tribal wars and all that. So yeah, extremely good point. Of course, they will say that the Greeks founded a civilization. Well, the Greeks are hardly white. You take two people side by side, okay? Take a Nordic person and take a Greek person, have them stand side by side. The Greek guy will look like me. He'll not look white. Okay, the Mediterranean peoples, the Greek people, and the Italians, they're not really white from the Nordic perspective. But according to these Eurocentric supremacist people, the true Aryans are the Nordics, right? Nordic people, the blonde haired, blue eyed, pale skinned people. The Greeks and the Italians are not like that. So you can't say that the Greeks were the Aryans. Your Aryans, your so called Aryans, are the Nordic people. So where was that superior Nordic civilization? Have you seen the Vikings? They still eat raw fish, pickled herrings, and what is that shark they eat? The rotten shark they eat. They take shark, they chop it into gigantic pieces, they bury it underground for 6 months, then they take it out and then they eat something like that. There's some process that behind that, but it is. I don't know if it's even an acquired taste. I don't remember what they call that the rotten shark thing, but I think it's banned in many civilized countries. that they have some good food, of course. They have what soup is that? I forget, quitta soupa or something like that. They have some. It's turnips and carrots and potatoes and meat or maybe fish, that sort of thing. The point is, there was no great Nordic civilization. There was no great Germanic civilization. Even 2,000 years ago, you didn't have that. Even 1,000 years ago, you had the beginning of the Germanic thing. Carolus Magnus, Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, he had conquered Germanic territories through the Northern Crusades and all. So you make a great point here, sir. You make a great point. There was no European civilization. They remained primitive for so long. Okay, next the question. False Tool says, will we see a World War III before 2100? I hope not. But maybe we will. Maybe we will. I think one of the things we could see soon is the India-China war. It could happen. Okay, and India is going to have to be very, very careful, and India will have to build its military might, its military capabilities very rapidly. Vinay Kaushik says the rotten shark dish is called hakarl. Outstanding. Thank you so much for that. Hakarl. Okay, Durjati says, what can a 12th pass guy, 30 years old, with no other degrees do to make a living or earn good money? Please suggest. I'm all ears and ready to commit. Look, whatever advice I may give, it cannot be taken as financial advice or career advice, okay? I'm not putting my money on the line. Okay, I have nothing to lose. So I can give you some suggestions or some opinions, but you have to be very careful about that. If you're 12th pass, you don't have a college degree, university degree, okay, cool. It means that you will not get a job in one of the corporations who want all these degrees. They are slaves to degrees. Show me this degree, show me that degree. Why don't you have first class? Why don't you have distinction? Why don't you have a degree from this college or that great college? Why from that college? Why not from the IITs? Why not from this IIT? All that nonsense. They care about degrees, they don't care about your abilities. So if you are only 12th pass, you will not get a job in any of these corporations and all that. So what can you do? I think the best thing you can do is be an entrepreneur, be a business person. Obviously you will need to invest some money for that, and these days we have good schemes, government schemes. You get loans for doing that. So you have to find a sector, an area that is underserved. You have to find a segment of the population that is being ignored, and you have to solve their problems. That is essentially what a business idea is. There is an existing gap, there's an existing problem in society. Society needs solutions, but nobody has provided the solution. So you go and provide the solution. Or maybe there are solutions, but they are not good enough, so you provide a better solution. So that's what you can do. So that is what business is essentially. And if you give value to society, society will give you value back in the form of money. That's how it works. That is a very broad general thing I'm telling you. So if you just have a 12th standard degree, no issue. I don't think that you are lower than others. I don't care about degrees personally. So I think you're gonna have to, if you want to make good money, then you're gonna have to go into business entrepreneurship. But it is very dangerous, very difficult, not easy, and it's your money that you're putting on the line. So it's not for everyone, and you have to be very careful. But you also have to take risks. So that is the thing about being an entrepreneur. So yeah, that's what I can tell you. I am no expert in these matters. You should ask real business experts. But I would say that would be the right path for you, because you want to earn good money, you want to be rich. That's a great thought to have. That's a great ambition to have. And I can promise you, you will never become rich working for somebody else. You will never become rich working a 9 to 5 job or whatever job. Okay, IT jobs are not 9 to 5; they're 9 to 12. Means 9 in the morning to 12 in the night. That's how IT jobs are. I know, I've been a cyber coolie once. So even that won't make you rich. You will never become rich working on a salary, earning a salary. So if you want to be rich, you have to start your own business. You have to become an entrepreneur, which obviously is not an easy task, but that is the way to go. Okay, next. Vinit says, as a vegetarian, I'm stunned. I'm expecting you're talking about the raw shark, the rotten shark, the fermented shark. uh, Miguel says, Poirier or Makachev, who wins? I want Poirier to win. I hope so. I hope he wins. Uh, Bishal Mahapatra says, is Nikita Khrushchev the best Soviet leader? Have you seen that video or that photo of him at the United Nations Security Council? He took his shoe in his hand and he was hammering the podium with a shoe. Very dramatic. Let's try and Google that, shall we? Let's Google it. Why not? Let us Google Nikita Khrushchev. Let us do that. Khrushchev shoe. Yeah, here you have it. Shoe banging incident. There you have it. At the United Nations, he takes his shoe in his hand and he slams it on the podium. Nikita Khrushchev. So yeah, that's kind of what he's remembered for, not for the other work. Do I think he's the best Soviet leader? No, I don't think so. It's Nikita Khrushchev who starts the decline of the USSR with the lowering of standards. When it comes to the most efficacious, overall best leader, most people won't like what I say, but it's Joseph Stalin. Yeah. I think Joseph Stalin was the best Soviet leader, despite everything he did, okay, which was definitely terrible, absolutely terrible. Okay, let's take a few more questions. I can see lots and lots and lots of questions. Apurva says, similar to your advice, I was a very ambitious student, but I ended up in a private college along with mental health issues. My interest in studies have also diminished. Any advice? My advice is very simple. Your studies are just a small phase of your life. Of course, you've been studying since you were 3 years old or whatever age, and you have to do it for the first 20 years of your life. Okay, I get it. It's terrible. But the real life that you're going to live is what comes after your studies. And that's what you have to plan for. So let's say you are in a private college and you're not happy that you are not in one of the top universities or whatever it is. That is not the point. Whether you get a degree from the top IIT or the top university or a random college, at the end of the day, what really matters is what you do with your life. You will have people who were toppers in their class, and by the age of 35, they are in some poor, not poor, in a very unremarkable job, doing a very good job of being a good employee. But you may have somebody who was never a topper who owns the company. That happens. My point is, you need to first understand who you are, what are your strengths and weaknesses, what are your aptitudes, what are you actually born to do, and then you have to pursue that. And it doesn't matter what the education system does to you. So you get your degree or whatever, you get out of it, you fix your mental health by lifting weights, I would say, or whichever way works for you. But you have to succeed in life, which means you have to make a career for yourself in something, either in whatever. I mean, whatever it is that is best for you, whether it is business, entrepreneurship, whether it is in the academic system, whether it is as an employee somewhere, a manager. You have to find what is right for you, which means you have to spend some time alone and introspect and understand yourself. Most people don't even know who they are. Most people are scared to be alone. I have known people like that. Okay, I've known people who said that, oh, if I were alone, I would go crazy. Why would you go crazy, man? But that's how it is, most people. So you have to develop some mental strength, mental fortitude, and figure out who you are and what you want to do in life. And then to hell with the education system, hell with whatever happened. You get out of that and you move on with life. Easier said than done, but you got to find a way. You've got to find a way and you got to work really hard for that. That's how it goes. Nothing is easy. No good thing is easy. Nothing valuable is ever easy in life. So that's what I will say. Do well. All the best, sir. Apurva. Warrior says, do you think a person like Sri Krishna will ever be born? Why can okay? Yeah, maybe in the future. It's possible. It happened in the past. It may happen again. Shivam Bharadwaj says Pakistan has admitted in their high court that POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, is foreign territory from their perspective. What are my views? My views are it doesn't make any difference. They are in possession of POK. That is called having facts on the ground. Technically, it may be a foreign territory. Technically, it may be this or that, but their armed forces are there. And currently, they are in possession of this territory. So, those are the facts on the ground. And these court things don't make any difference. I'm a realistic person. I don't care about words and documents and all that. The facts on the ground are the facts on the ground. Okay? That's how I see it. But it's a temporary situation. We know that Pakistan is a temporary artificial nation. And I hope the people of Pakistan get some freedom from this horrible, atrocious army that is running the country. Geopolitical Dubey says, I don't like any sport. Is it a bad thing? Why is it necessarily a bad thing? It's up to you. Maybe you like other stuff. Maybe that's. See, you should not be concerned about other people's opinions about personal things. So if you don't like a sport, or some people may not like, I don't know, music. Some people may not like movies. It's your choice. Why is it good or bad? It is who you are. Embrace who you are. Okay, it's fine. I have no issue with you not liking any sport. Entirely perfectly fine. No issues. Any defense book suggestions for NDA aspirants? I don't know anything about NDA, what goes into the preparation. So I am not the right person to ask this question. I have no idea whatsoever. The suggestions I may give you may be completely inappropriate for that particular kind of exam preparation or whatever preparation. So I am sorry, I apologize, but I don't have the answer to this question. Okay. Okay, what else do we have? Um, Ayush Mishra says it's the UCL final. Which team are you supporting? What is UCL? Let's Google it together. Not this. Oh, give me a second. I'll have to go to Google, right? What is UCL? I'm sure I know what it is, but I'm right now my mind is blank. UCL. Oh, UEFA Champions League. Of course, of course. Today is the final, is it? When is the final? Who's playing? Dortmund and the Real Madrid. Tomorrow or tonight, 12:30 a.m. Which team am I supporting? I shall support Real Madrid because they are real, they are royal. I don't know much about Borussia Dortmund. Of course, I know the name and I've heard of it since I was a kid. But let's say I support the Real Madrid because they're good. All right, let's take some more questions. Malik Sayed says tips for IIT JEE exam drop year strategy. What's a drop year? You take 1 year off and then you do the exam. Is it that? So when it comes to exam preparation, you have to understand that the objective is not to acquire knowledge; it's just to pass the exam. Okay, so you have to be practical and realistic. It's like a military campaign. When you are on a military campaign and you have an objective, you want to capture this territory. You don't go and capture everything around that. Your objective, you have one job and one job only. Go and capture the territory. Similarly, when it comes to passing an exam, clearing an exam, and doing well in it, you only want to clear the exam with the best possible marks. To hell with the knowledge. The knowledge you can acquire later during your IIT 2-3 years, whatever, 4 years. So my point is, it has to be exam focused. Get as many exam papers of the last 70-80 years you have, and every day solve one paper. Do it over and over again in exam like conditions. That's what I would say. Obviously, you have to first acquire the knowledge that you need to solve the exam paper. So, but you should spend the last 3 months just solving every day one exam paper. Just do it over and over again. You'll become good at it. That's what I would say from what I have experienced long ago. McLevin says, is it worth becoming a commercial pilot? Look, if you enjoy flying, if you find it fascinating being up in the clouds and having the control of the aircraft, it's fun, I'm sure. In that case, it's fun. You get to see stuff that very few people get to see. And I'm sure the pay is good. And you get to travel all over the place, all over the world. If you're a domestic pilot, you can still travel all over the country. If you're an international pilot, you can travel all over the world. You'll stay in 5-star hotels if you're into that, and whatever else, right? So if that's the life for you, travel and living in fancy hotels and flying aircraft, if it's and good money, I'm sure, then yeah, maybe it's worth doing that. But I'm sure it's not easy. I'm sure that lots of people want to get into this job, and it's not. I'm sure there's a huge demand for this. So you have to be realistic. All right, let's take a couple of more questions and then we are done. Mayuri says, what's the etymology of the word wildebeest? I think it is Dutch or Afrikaans. Afrikaans is a language that is closely related to Dutch. So I think wildebeest is either Dutch or Afrikaans. And it's an animal. It's an African animal, right? It's one of those gazelle-like, gigantic, robust gazelle, tank-like animals. Yeah. Ubendran says, is North Korea a fully sovereign country or a vassal state of China or Russia? Look, it desires to be a fully sovereign country, but it's not. And it's a vassal of not Russia, but China. It has some Russian connection also because Russia is not really far. But yeah, mostly vassal of China. And they don't want to be that. If I recall correctly, the current leader, Mr. Kim Jong-un, his father had told him that China is the nation with which we must have the best relations, but China is the nation that wants to interfere the most in our country. So you have to play that game, the tightrope walk, and you have to unify the Korean Peninsula with South Korea. So that's what Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Il-sung's son, said to him, allegedly. Primal Raj says, can India develop high-yield hydrogen weapons or low-yield fission weapons? Both. Both. But for that, you have to test, and I'm sure you can't test today. So you have to do simulations, you have to do subcritical tests and things like that. Of course, India can develop high yield hydrogen weapons. Hydrogen weapon means a thermonuclear thermonuclear weapon. It's a fission fusion device, in which the fusion reaction is triggered by the initial fission reaction. That's what it is. And of course, low yield fission weapons anybody can build. I mean, not anybody, but you need to have the ingredients, the spice mix you need to have, and you need to have some technical know-how. So engineering work. Yeah, so India can do both. Rohit says Lenin versus Stalin, who was the greatest? I would say Stalin was greater. I am not condoning the things that Stalin has done, okay, by any means. But I'm saying overall, Lenin versus Stalin, I would say Stalin was greater. All right. Harsh Zaveri says, is India's drone industry now getting world class? Idea Forge and Adani Defense. Look, I think it is. India is going to be one of the major drone manufacturers, and the more you manufacture, the better you get. The more you can iterate and more variations of drones you can come up with. So I think in a decade, India is going to be the world's largest drone manufacturing country, most likely. So yeah, it's great going. I'm very happy to see this. Krishna Saraf says, your opinion on green hydrogen as a source of sustainable energy, fuel, etc., is mainly in transport. What is green hydrogen? I think somebody had spoken to me about this. Was it a minister on one of my podcasts? It's possible. Let me just quickly Google what is green hydrogen. I forgot. Green hydrogen. Okay, water electrolysis. Of course. So what you do is very simple. You take water and you put an anode and a cathode in there, and you break water into pieces. Essentially, so you. So what you do is you take the hydrogens away from the oxygen. That's what you do. Okay, and as a result, you get hydrogen and oxygen, and you get rid of the oxygen, and you have green hydrogen left. So that hydrogen is acquired by electrolyzing water. I think it's a reasonably good source of sustainable energy and fuel transportation, because it is the source is essentially limitless. Ocean water, it's almost limitless source. So until we start doing too much, perhaps. But I think, yeah, for now, I think it's a good source of sustainable energy or fuel for transportation, etc. I think it's a good bet, and there's no bad byproduct of this technology. So yeah, it's good. I saw a good question. It disappeared. Let's see. Okay, let's take this one. Himank says, and this is the last question for today. Okay, we're going to end with this. Will Saudi Arabia go nuclear if Iran acquires nuclear weapons? I think they'll try to do that, because that's a big threat for them. It's a big danger for them. They'll be, from their perspective, from the Saudi perspective, Iran is a big threat, because Saudi Arabia, first of all, is a US ally, and it's a Sunni Shia thing, and Iran is an ancient empire. Iran is an ancient civilization, and there's been historical hostility for a variety of reasons between the Arabs and the Persians. So yeah, and from the balance of power perspective, I think Iran and Saudi Arabia have roughly similar hard power score. So yes, if Iran acquires nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will try their best to themselves acquire nuclear weapons. And they will try, for sure. How will they acquire nuclear weapons? I'm not sure. The Americans for sure won't give them. Maybe they'll try and buy nukes from Pakistan. When it comes to Pakistan, everything has a price. So maybe the Saudis will try and buy nukes from Pakistan. They will not approach India for that, because India will not give them nuclear weapons. India is not a proliferator of nuclear technology. So I think the best bet for Saudi Arabia is to go and approach Pakistan and try to pay them for a bunch of nukes, maybe 20, 30 nukes. How much will it cost? We have money. How much? What's your price, essentially? All right. With that, I'm going to end this session. Thank you once again, everybody, for participating, asking so many wonderful questions. And I will see you as usual in the next live stream next week. Today is Saturday. So I'll see you on Wednesday, most likely, in the next live stream, which is going to be a completely live stream. All right. So thank you so much once again. And I will see you soon. Take care and keep raising your standards.